Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this panel. We're really excited to have this incredible panel talking about self-advocacy and disability rights in the workplace. So I'm really happy and honored to introduce the moderator of this panel. His name is Simon Camaj. He and his family live right here in the Chicago area. I work with him on CTF's Corporate Advisory Council, which is working to help us improve our corporate connections and raise more corporate revenue for CTF. Simon actually came into the foundation as an NF endurance athlete, running marathons in honor of his neighbor and best friend, John O'Donnell, who has a child with NF1. And so Simon graciously offered to be our moderator for this panel. Simon is the National Life Absence and Disability Benefit Practice Leader at Mercer Consulting. He leads two of Mercer's essential specialty practices with over 250 colleagues focused on developing and driving solutions to help employers offer more effective and strategic life absence and disability and voluntary benefits programs. His practice includes Mercer's LAD and Voluntary Centers of Excellence, which are formed to improve efficiency and gain better purchasing leverage. In addition, he is a member of Mercer's United States leadership team, where he participates in and supports broader strategic business and health initiatives. Throughout his career, Simon has developed extensive industry and product knowledge, business to business, and consumer insights. Simon has more than 20 years of industry experience in absence management, operations, account service delivery, and distribution leadership. Before joining Mercer, he led a team of sales professionals focused on growing Aetna's national accounts group insurance, driving record results for the absence, disability, and life portfolio. He has a degree in business administration and with a concentration in insurance from Olivet College in Olivet, Michigan. And he, along with his wife and two children, live right here in the Chicago area. So without further ado, I'm going to have Simon introduce the panel. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Barbara. Appreciate that. Everyone, glad to be here. And so we're going to jump right in. And from a panel perspective, here's what I'm going to do in terms of introductions. We're gonna speak through, and I'm going to start with a speaker. That speaker will introduce who they are, but I'm going to have a prompt where they have a very specific story. So here's what's great about this panel is we have stories about NF1, NF2, but really through the lens of a doctor, a patient, a president of I'd say a supporting firm, an endurance athlete. Maria can't be here, and we're going to cover the lens of an employer. I'm going to go ahead and do that. As Barbara mentioned, I have 250 employees, a little bit more now that report underneath me. So I'm going to give that view as well. And Maria said that she'll be available for questions afterwards. So when I prompt, we're going to have the panelists introduce themselves. I'm going to call their names first, but they'll say who they are, where they're from. But I'm going to ask them some specific questions, okay? And the whole idea, again, while it's self-advocacy and disability rights, it's going to be through the lens of storytelling. And then I'm going to move 3 or 4 stories and prompts from each. And we're going to save some questions at the end, probably the last 10 minutes or so. Barbara, if I could see you, yes, that'd be good. And otherwise, we're going to get started. So I'm going to start. I'm going to say I'm very conscious. Barbara actually said my last name perfect. It's like the first time in 48 years, and that feels good. And I got Simon, a fellow countryman back there, that can acknowledge she said my name perfectly. So I don't want to screw up Dr. Clay Herrings. Oh, yes, I did it. I did it right, guys. And what I did before this panel, I reached out to each panelist, 1, to develop some rapport, 2, to hear a story, but 3, to develop some conversational topics. And I tell you what, each presenter, each panelist blew me away. And it makes it exciting and worthwhile to be a part of it. So I think you're going to hear a lot of great stuff. But Dr. Clay, first introduce yourself, where you're from, your name, but you have such a unique view. And that's why I wanted to start you first. Dr. Clay can say he's not only a physician, but he's an NF patient. So he's going to give you 2 views today that are very unique. So if you can introduce yourself, give us a view from a physician first, and then some prompts as coming up as a patient that maybe motivated you to become a physician.
Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be here today. So my name is Dr. Clay Hoerig. I'm originally from a tiny farm town in Northwest Ohio. I say it's out in the sticks, so it's in the middle of nowhere. So I'm a pediatric neuro-oncology fellow. So that means after went to high school, I went to undergrad for 4 years, did a master's degree, went to medical school for 4 years, trained in general pediatrics for 3 years, trained in hematology and oncology, so blood and cancer, for 3 additional years. Now I'm doing an additional year focusing on brain and spinal cord tumors, and I have a special interest in NF. I was diagnosed with NF1 when I was 6 months old. I was the only one in my family that had it, so it was a little surprise for everyone. And I think it really kind of inspired me. I mean, like a lot of people here and the family members, they know, like, it kind of like puts a different plan on things and you spend more time at the hospital. So I grew up going to the hospital, and I am 33 now. So I was kind of in the time when they were still trying to do a lot of learning about it. So I was there a little more frequently. And I think what I realized now, like growing up in childhood, teenage years, young adult years, and now as a physician, I think what I realized, the biggest issue for people, I don't want to say issue because that's kind of aggressive. It's really hard to know what we all want, because we know I think know there's resources available, but there's so many resources, I think it's overwhelming. Mm-hmm. So I think the biggest thing that I've learned and that I appreciate as a patient was realizing what I needed and what I needed help with, and being able to communicate and ask for that. Because it's always good to admit that you need help, but if you don't know exactly what you need help with, that I think is a challenge. So, and that's really helpful for me as the physician side, when people come and say, you know what, Dr. Clay, I'm kind of concerned about this, or I have these issues. I would like this. Is this something that we can do? That can help things move a lot quicker.
Yeah, and hey, Dr. Clay, that comes up with a great point. And I remember Ken talking to you, and one of the things you referenced is when you're 18 and you went in for just a regular examination, and that conversation changed your life, but then you realize that not only do I have something where I have a path and a journey forward, but how to ask for help and how to participate in something. So introduce yourself, tell us where you live, and then tell us a little bit about that initial journey, but what prompted you to be leading ALDA and in advocating for yourself. Can you give us that view as well?
Okay, great. Like Clay said, I'm happy to be here, and good to see all of you here. My name is Ken Arcia, and I am president of the Association of Late Deafened Adults. I was born and raised in Central California, in Fresno. I'm not sure how many of you heard of that. And then after graduating college, I moved to the Bay Area for about 20 years. And then I was offered a position in Phoenix about 7 years ago. So I live in Arizona. As Simon said, when I was 18, as part of a regular hearing test, my ENT sent me he wanted to send me down to the House Ear Institute in Los Angeles. I'm sure many of you have heard of them. And so they did some more testing, and they found that Dr. William House was my doctor, and he came over and explained. He said, well, you have neurofibromatosis type 2. And I'm like, what language are you speaking? What are you talking about? I'd never heard of that term. And so he explained, well, you have a couple of tumors. We need to have them removed, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I put my hands in the hands of the doctors and said, let's go for it. So then it started my whole journey. But after I had both tumors removed and I was basically deaf, I went through a couple of years of denial where, I'm fine. Then I realized I'm going to need some help here because I'm missing a lot of conversations. So I reached out to a few friends I knew that had hearing aids and started the process of finding where to get assistive technology and where to find support groups. Back then, this is way before the internet, this is in the early 80s. So all these support groups were in person only. And so I was lucky to find the local chapter of HLA. Back then it was called SHHH. So they helped me out a lot, quite a bit. And then through them, I went to a state conference that I was able to meet other people my age that were also signing. I had been learning sign language. And so I really connected with them. And I asked, are you SHHH? And they said, yes, but we're also ALDA. And so I've been involved with them. I felt like we use our slogan, lost my hearing, found a family, because I really connected with them. They're my second family. So I've been involved with them for almost 30 years now. Funny story, when I came to this hotel for this conference, I walked in and I said, I've been here before. We had our ALDA conference in 1998 here, 24 years ago.
Great. So we have a physician view that's come up. Ken's given this advocacy where he's taken a diagnosis and turned it into leading an organization, driving others. I'm going to now give another view through Eddie. Then afterwards, I'm actually going to pinch hit for Maria. Give an employer view, then pivot and ask some questions back to Dr. Clay. But Eddie, you've heard some other things in advocacy. What I loved in our conversation was how motivated you were and how you saw nothing as a limitation. So when we think of advocacy, sometimes advocacy is standing up for yourself. Eddie, I really think you were doing the opposite. I'm going to show you. So tell us a little bit about that mentality. I know Clay's going to talk about that in the end, about getting involved in other activities outside of just what you're used to show that you're more than one thing. Talk to us how you did it. Talk to us about your motivation. Take us through that little step. But if you can introduce yourself and where you're from first, that would be awesome.
So, hi, my name is Eddie. Originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but I spent about past 9 years in Denver. But I was born with NF1, diagnosed at birth, and had something over 20 procedures in my life, but that hasn't stopped me from being extremely active in high school. I played soccer on the varsity team for 3 years, starting most of those games. I've always been an extremely active guy, running, biking, skiing, and having spent 9 years in Denver, every weekend during the winter, just pretty much going to any mountain to go skiing, and even some of those more advanced runs, blues, blacks, double black diamonds. I really started getting in running in high school when I was playing soccer, and that has led me to run 14 half marathons and a marathon. And in that time, I have raised over $130,000 for CTF.
Can we get a clap for that? Thank you for that. I'm gonna let me keep going, and we'll pull into another topic. So, and always tying it to the title and why we're here. So I'll pinch hit for Maria. And one of the conversations Maria said to me, and when we were going through the interview, she's like, well, what am I going to bring to the meeting? What am I going to say? I'm not a patient. I don't have, and I said, Maria, you have a very important story for everybody that's in the audience. So I'll tell it now, and I'll tell it through a lens of an employer. I started in the disability space in the late 90s, okay? Right when I got out of college. And it was one of these situations where it was a contract and you were either eligible or you weren't, right? Kind of cold, pretty binary. And that was before great technology. And I remember taking intake calls where you were trained, here's the contract, are they disabled, yes or no? And this was for any diagnosis that comes through a disability plan or an individual plan. But when you started listening to folks when they were calling, it was more that they had to advocate for themselves than they actually had to file for a disability. Then I realized at that point, wow, this is what I'm actually going to do in my career. And we have to help folks and build better disability programs and better ecosystems with employers, because I worked for an insurance company for a long time, but the last 5 years, my main motivation of coming to Mercer was I felt some of the disability programs were a little bit broken. And not only were they broken, they were done through the lens of a contract. You're dealing with human beings, right? Usually when they file a disability or they're making a phone call outside of a perfect pregnancy, it's the toughest time of their life, and it's also income protection. So if you think about it now, the employer view, wow, has it changed for the better? And knock on wood, I'd like to believe firms like Mercer has influenced that. But you think of diversity, equity, inclusion, which is a very big driver for recruiting employees, retaining employees, but ESG and having your mission. Disability advocacy is huge within employers. Old paradigm was, do I say something? Do I disclose? Will it be held against me? That is the exact opposite of what's happening in corporate life. It is considered a part of a community, bringing somebody in. That's a very good thing now. So what I would say is, from an employer view, and Clay, I'm going to pivot it over to you. I'd say these stories are considered enrichments to organizations and betterments to organizations. And I'd say the recruitment is different, the acceptance is different, the acceleration of one's career is different. So the world has changed for the better. So I'd say to anybody in the audience, whether it's yourself, your children, your family, or your friends, you can have a voice. That voice is asked to be louder and to always share your mission, share your story. It's a good thing, but it's like, this is not the time to be quiet. It's time to kick down the door. Clay, Dr. Clay, by the way, this is what I like about Clay. He didn't tell me he was a doctor till about 15 minutes in. So now I have to call him Dr. Clay. But Dr. Clay, so it's a new time. You've come up, you said you're 33 years old, patient view, doctor view. As an individual, talk about your advocacy. So if somebody's applying for a job, if somebody's newly diagnosed, what advice would you give them in your journey now that you know what you know from a physician? And I know in our conversation, you were talking about a physician conversation should not be the deciding factor in how you live your life. Talk about that as a patient, but what you tell somebody, some advice, looking for a job, being a part of a community, playing sports.
One of the things I say is, and as we see it today, so many of us have different stories, and they're all different from one another. So no one's journey is going to be the same, and that's what I tell everyone to remember. I always say, kind of what we were saying earlier, when I asked a patient to describe themselves, I always encourage them. Yes, NF is a part of your life, or any type of diagnosis, but it's not everything. And I try and keep that in mind and say, NF should never be an excuse to not try and do stuff. Is there some things we have to adjust? Of course. And I said, with that, let's work together. And the biggest thing that I say now, as a doctor, as a physician standpoint, what I learned from my own experiences, if there's something that can be done, is it going to be a little more work? Yes. I say just planning ahead helps a lot, because I think especially, I don't know if some people are a little shy to ask. I mean, it's always hard to ask for help, but I found the more comfortable I got with asking for help, there are a lot of people that want to help out, and there's so many resources out there. It just takes that little bit of time. I would hate to estimate how much I spent on examinations, because my licensing exams alone cost $2,000 to $3,000 per exam, and I've taken multiple exams over the 16 years, and all those deadlines. For example, if you want any special accommodations, you have to file for them at least 3 months in advance. So I think the biggest thing is, and as a physician, I always encourage, we can make things happen. We just have to be planners. So I would say that's the biggest thing. If there's anything that you want to be done, nothing's off the table within reason. Just plan on filing a little paperwork early, and that's the biggest thing. Planning ahead helps so much. And please utilize the medical team. We're all here for you as well. But I always say, I cannot help you if I don't know what we're doing. So I always say, if you don't come with a list of questions to me, I'm a little disappointed. And if any of you meet me in the clinic setting, you'll see that's what I say as well.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Clay. Ken, I'm going to bring it over to you. Then I'm going to ask a question of my friend Eddie over here. So Ken, when we were talking, one of the questions I wanted to pull out for you to talk about to the audience, speaking of list of questions, how would you give advice for somebody to advocate, knowing your story, where they just found out about their diagnosis, knowing it's fresh, what they're going through as a human, but what about somebody that's had it, treatments, conversations? somebody that's had it for multiple years, from those two different extremes, we'll talk about self-advocacy, putting yourself out there, asking for help as the world has changed. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What advice would you give to the audience, regardless of where you are in your journey?
Sure. I think now we live in a great time because back when I was diagnosed, there was no internet, like I mentioned before. And so now when you're diagnosed with NF1, NF2, any of these, you can reach out to, like Facebook, Twitter, any social media, or use Google to find local support groups. There are hundreds, thousands of different support groups out there, and I'm sure you can find something that will match what you're looking for. When I was first considering getting a cochlear implant, I looked on Facebook and I found a couple different groups. One had 30,000 members. Wow. So any question I could think of, somebody was going to be able to reply to me with an answer. Well, regarding self-advocacy, I think, it's so vital. I'll never forget a good friend of mine told me when I was still struggling how to stand up for myself or be more assertive and asking for my needs. He said, if you don't advocate for yourself, who will? Right. Wow, okay, yeah, you're right. So I took it from that point, this is 25 years ago, but you need to take the reins and take control of your own destiny, so to speak.
Awesome. So, by the way, I have to acknowledge the individual in the back. I love the Tigers hat. First of all, I'm a Detroit Tigers fan. That is the coolest shirt in the world. If I have one ask, I got to get that shirt. Born a fighter, so I love it. So, anyways, I love that. Had to acknowledge it. Caught my attention. Tigers hat caught my attention. Shirt second. So I love the Tigers, but I love your shirt more. Eddie, so we've talked about advocacy, fighting for yourself, and really planning. Talk about why you did not accept a limitation. What advice do you give to the audience? So you're a runner, you've played sports, you've made a decision to move forward. Talk about when somebody's at that crossroads to say, I'm bigger than what's been told to me. How do I fight through limitations? What advice do you give to the folks here that are listening? Tell us a little bit about why you don't accept limitations and that you've actually turned them into an opportunity.
Yeah, so I guess I just, truly believe in myself, and, I love being active. So I just want to continually tell myself, I can go do whatever type of run, bike ride, or, type of run, skiing. So, and trying to be as active as I can and try to raise awareness. So just continually telling myself that I can do this, like this genetic disorder is not going to stop me from accomplishing the things I want to accomplish.
Can I, real quick on that front, when you started running, were you an actual runner, or did you just push through and say, hey, I'm going to do this? Talk to me about that.
Not really. So I guess pretty much really got into running, because of soccer. When I was in high school, I played midfield for soccer for 4 years, 3 years in the varsity team. And then over the summers, I just, started running more just to stay in better shape. And eventually one day that run turned into a 6-mile run. And then a few days later, I decided why not try to run a half marathon a month later. And that's when it all started. So just kind of got into running through soccer and wanted to get in better shape.
Good for you. Clay, I'm going to do a pivot, and we'll stay connected to Eddie's story. I'll do a few more things, and we'll leave for about 7 to 10 minutes, maybe for questions from the audience for the panelists. We have great stories up here. Dr. Clay, one of the things you said to me, you're talking about your small town and things of that nature, is the importance of playing sports, being a part of your community, almost being that mantelpiece to say, this is how you do it. Being a positive commercial for yourself, but also for NF and for others. Talk about the importance of that and being a part of something bigger and just showing the world. Talk about that.
So yeah, I think my biggest thing is like, I'm going to keep stressing is I encourage everyone never to be afraid to ask questions. We stress it so much to other people. Please ask us questions, but you should be ready to ask questions for yourself and for your kids. And I think I've like tried to watch a lot of the stories on the YouTube channel of like what parents and everyone says, and everyone kept stressing that they treated all the kids the same, like with the brothers and sisters. And what that comes back to is my parents, I think, asked at every single appointment, it's like, oh, what can he do? What are you okay with him doing? Can he like, if he's going to be if he's going to be coordinated and have eye-hand coordination, can he play sports? If he's going to attempt to dance, is he okay with dancing? I can't dance, so that was way off the table. So that, but yeah, I think like the biggest thing I've like just witnessed and like I appreciate now from the physician standpoint is when people are able to ask questions, we're able to think further. So with that, my parents did ask a lot of questions on what I was able to do, and kind of why that was important is because part of my NF, I have an optic glioma. So so they were really concerned with sports. But after everything, we found out I was okay to play football. So I played football throughout junior high and high school. I played baseball and basketball. I then was trying to gain weight to play football, and I lost a lot of weight. So then I switched and ran cross country and track, and now I run marathons as well as like kind of a hobby. But I think it's important that it comes back to is just because we all have our story, and I always tell people I want everyone to know that there can be a lot more to their story than just the NF. That's why I try to tell people when I like was volunteering with Camp New Friends or one of the NF camps, that I said, I want to hear all about your story and what we can add to it. So again, that's all coming back to just ask questions. I think that's really going to take us a lot far. And in the end, like with anything, advocating for yourself, knowing what questions you want to ask helps us so much.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm going to build off of that. And again, from an employer view, I was telling Barbara in the lobby, my boss is the president of our firm, and on Sunday nights he sends notes about random things that are happening and in his life. And you know, some enjoy it, some don't. But he asked me to be a guest speaker, if you will, or a guest writer. And in the honor of this event, I'm sending it to everybody about my motivation was through my neighbor. And my neighbors, the O'Donnells, their daughter has NF1. And I saw that not only were they you know, proud of their daughter, their entire focus was, how do you always make a path forward? So naturally you worry about somebody's future or current state, and how are they going to grow up? What's going to happen at prom? All those things. Are the people going to like me? Are they going to accept me? But the O'Donnells always were focusing on a path forward. And so to me, I was like, these folks are like a commercial. They're like an inspiration. At that moment, I said, I'm going to start running marathons for them. I'm about 12 in. I got one in Indianapolis. But as a result, I'm sending a note to thousands of people on Sunday, and they're naturally going to ask, wow, look at that commercial. So I'd say everybody up here is a commercial. Everybody in the audience here can be a commercial. That goes back to what I was saying in the work environment. People want to hear these stories, okay? It's an enrichment. That's a part of diverse work environments. A lot of work environments have what they call BRGs, business resource groups. And I'll tell you, you know, these kind of stories, but I'd say be a commercial. And I think of everybody up here, what Eddie's doing and what Ken's doing and what Dr. Clay's doing, they are a commercial. That commercial will lead somebody to ask questions, get answered. Be bold, ask somebody to be along from the ride. I don't have NF, but guess what? Until I can't stop running, I'm not going to stop talking about it, and you know, start and being a connector, right, to other organizations and teams. So I think that's another message for the three panelists up here: be a connector, be a commercial, and you know, bring people in. People want to help. It's a different time. I'm going to pivot, Ken, back to you. Talk about you know, all the organizations that are out there. I know you lead ALDA, and you found it and you found your way. Any advice for the folks out there of like the support, being bold, and then using yourself as a, you know, as a commercial, if you will, to stay on that theme? Is, you know, you were diagnosed, you got involved, now you're leading an organization. Any advice for the folks out there to do something the same in their journey?
Well, like I mentioned before, I think just be willing to reach out, and if you need help or if you have questions, reach out. I admit, for the first couple of years after my becoming deaf, I did not do that, and so I missed out on a lot of information until I reached out and started asking for help. I wanted to mention that ALDA was founded in 1988, 89. And one of the co-founders, her name was Kathy Skyer Herring, and she's from Chicago, and she had NF2. So we've always had people involved with ALDA that have NF2. So like I mentioned, and now with the internet and everything out there, you can find what you're looking for and just reach out.
Awesome. So I have two more things for our speakers, one for Eddie, then one for Clay, then I'm going to open it up for questions. But you guys have been fantastic. So Eddie, if you were to give one piece of advice to someone that they want to advocate for themselves, whether it's at work, at home, in the community, what's the first step that you would say to take? Because I tell people in life all the time, you can do anything, you just can't do it all at once. So what's the one thing you'd say to somebody that might be, in that self-doubt, doesn't know how to advocate, might be spinning, might be thinking about too many things? What's the one or two things to say? How do you take a step and take a path forward? What advice would you give?
Maybe just try to find like one person you can reach out to and advocate for yourself too, and then maybe slowly try to advocate to others. But if you're having trouble advocating for yourself, at least find one person that you could feel comfortable talking to, and then maybe that could help you move forward talking to others and help you advocate more for yourself.
Can I ask a question there to add on to that, Eddie? Being a part of a community, has that helped you and inspired you more in terms of just moving forward? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, definitely. It's helped me find other ways to advocate for myself and reach out to people for donations or potentially joining me for a half marathon.
Okay, terrific. Dr. Clay, okay, so
Yes.
we have the big finale with you, then we're going to ask questions to the audience. You were talking about, as a patient, not accepting the status quo. Sometimes in the medical world, and you know this as a physician, you manage to the mean, right? Whether it's diet, sleep, everybody's different. If you're a patient, and whether you're newly diagnosed, you've had it, you've been in treatment for a while, things are changing, what do you say to walk in, like, and again, not to be unreasonable, but how do you push your physicians to say, don't give me a generic answer, let's strive for more, let's strive for better? How do you advocate as a patient?
I know I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but I think the easiest questions to answer as a physician are the really specific ones. It's like, if you come in and you're like saying, okay, well, I am having these side effects from this medication, what is our second line? Or like, what is the next step? That's a lot easier to like work with and say, oh, I don't like this medication for this reason. And even now, like, I would ask questions like, when I would go to my doctor who was treating me, like, and I'll use a personal example. And if any of you ever see me, I'm extremely open with my experiences. I know this is really quick. I actually wanted to apply for the military scholarship for medical school. And I went to my doctor about it. And I asked him for like the letter for an exemption. He told me no. And then I was asking him multiple questions. I said, okay, well, I've had and I gave a lot of specific examples, and it was going back and forth. And did I end up getting the answer that I was hoping for? No, but I understood a lot more, and allowed me to alter my plan slightly, and I was still able to achieve what I wanted. So I think that's the biggest thing. Even if it's not going to be the answer you always want, I think the more specific answers, the more specific questions you can give, the more at least reassured you will feel, because you have more information. I think we all want more information about things. And I think just to maintain as good of a doctor-patient relationship as possible is making sure we're all on the same page. And I know as a patient, I didn't always want to tell my doctor things as well. And now looking back, I regret it just because I'm at a loss on how I can help patients if I don't know what's going on and I hear about it later. So I encourage you, I promise you, none of the doctors, even if we look a little tired at times, we always like to hear more information. Even if it's stuff that we don't want to hear, at the end of the day, it still helps us when we're happy that we hear it, because at least then we know that everything's out in the open and that we're all on the same page.
Awesome, awesome. I'm going to tie it before I open up for questions. I'm just going to tie some awesome themes from the panelists here. Ken was really talking about that self-advocacy from the point of, one, acknowledging that there is support, asking for it, and never stop, and even leading an organization that supports others, right? So that's a form of that commercial self-advocacy and understanding the world's changed. And the one thing that Ken's made a great point on is, if you think about when his journey started, pre-internet, right? It was a little bit, tougher times to find help. Now it's unprecedented. That's probably fair to say, correct, Ken? Okay. And in terms of, Eddie, it's limitations, don't accept them, right? Stay motivated, and really taking opportunities to be a part of a community and inspire others, but keep participating, funds, awareness through running, but also through actions. And then Dr. Clay, as a physician, right? It's asking the right questions, being prepared, speak for yourself, speak for others, and then, always participate, get out of your comfort zone. You'll only grow. And then I'd say, again, from that employer view, this has never been a better time. Employees, I say this all the time to our clients, they're like, well, why do we have to do this? Why can't we just have a generic plan? Why can't we have basic benefits? Well, I tell them, first answer would be is you'd have no employees anymore. But after they get over that shock of that direct answer, I said 2 years ago, something changed in the work world. And I think it's a good thing. Employees have bigger voices and they have more choices. There are consequences if you do not meet an employee halfway, and that those consequences will be A, feedback, which will be very public, and then B, the choice to leave. And so I'm telling you, again, from a disability and a self-advocacy perspective, and the BRG, the business resource groups, employers are trying to really find a way to make any experience in the employment world more fulfilling, but especially if somebody has a story, needs to assimilate, or even needs some accommodations, it's unprecedented. So it's a different time. So those are really some things I wanted to weave in, but I open it up now, and anybody that has a question, and it does not have to be related, it could be anything that the speaker said. So we're opening up. We have somebody back there, and we got another one here, so that's good. And I think we have
always the furthest away, I feel like.
Okay, on the what?
It looks like the questions are coming up on there.
Okay, can I see that? Just, yeah, perfect.
Thank you guys so much for everything that you've shared today. I guess I do want to just kind of bring attention to, in many ways, yes, it is, there has never been a better time to be an employee in terms of employees' rights. But I would say it's a big stretch to say that all employers are going to be accommodating and respectful, as they should be. And even if your HR team or your supervisor is okay with your accommodations and meets you halfway, what if your colleagues don't, and you can't get them on board with supporting you in your accommodations? Or, you were talking about getting accommodations for testing and having to ask for those months in advance. There's a lot of like, yes, don't accept no as an answer, go after your dreams, like, get it. And also, what would be your thoughts to say when you face some like pretty strong resistance?
You want to take, I could take it from an employer view if you want to take it from a physician view.
I mean, yeah, if you want to go through the employer.
Yeah, so here's what I'd say. And I'll say I'm not an attorney, but what I'd say from an accommodation, I'd say most employers now, and again, not all of them are there, but I'd say your larger employers, one of the things that you're seeing is the work environment has changed, where It's no longer you come into work and we have return to work programs that are based in 1991. Now it's what type, if when you're looking at the job, it's the work environment, what someone can do and what someone can tolerate. Yes, is it a little bit more on a manager? And what I will say is the direct manager is not the most important person there, because the direct manager, just to be candid with you, they get a little nervous, right? So their natural instinct is say, I can't take you back, I can't tolerate, because they don't understand. So I'd say the first thing you got to understand is familiarity with the accommodations program, number one, familiarity with the return to work program, number two. Connect with the broader program, understand it, versus asking just the direct manager. Direct managers, they're in the business of doing their day job. When someone's out, this is a complication and it's new. So to me, it's understanding, partnering with HR, understanding the environment, and then taking a step with the manager versus asking the manager. We've seen a big change. Hey, does the world need to get better there? Absolutely. But I'd say is there's more acceptance, but acceptance has to come with a form of education. And that's a part of self-advocacy. Understand that return to work and that accommodation program, see if you can get help, work with the employer, and then bring the manager along. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would just say from the, I'll try 3 points because I saw a question on there that I can hopefully help answer.
Okay.
So when filling out any type of accommodation form or even applying for disability, I promise you I won't be able to get forms done within like less than 24 hours. So bringing me a form and saying, oh, can I have it done like by the next day is going to be hard, because with school forms and other things, it does take some time, and it also depends on what form you want. I would probably say the easiest way is if you bring your physician a form, if you bring them the form, that's a huge help to start with, rather than us trying to like hunt it down. If it's filled out, even better, or knowing what form, because there's a lot of different forms, like disability forms are different than accommodation forms. So I think if you can bring those in the beginning of the job, and I would say probably one of my favorite groups to work with is adolescent and young adults, because they're a feisty group and they're like developing. And what I always tell them, I said, you're not going to like every job that you have. And it's okay if you figure that out and you don't like it for whatever reason, and it's okay to switch. Even if we try and get everything taken care of, it's okay. I mean, I think most of us in here probably had at least one job we didn't like. So I think that's something to help. Hopefully that helps, but I'd probably say almost all the employers that I've worked with, they all have some type of accommodation form or a disability, and it does take a little bit of time for us to get it filled out. So if you're trying to get either of those things from your physician, if you can maybe like try and get it a little further in advance, like a couple weeks, it helps. And then there's other things that could go into that as well, especially if they're asking for any specific test. Yep. So being prepared is the biggest thing.
Yeah, one other thing before we go to the next person. Dr. Clay, you brought up a great point, and being in this business a long time. ADA accommodation, way different than disability. Some are position specific, some are requirement position specific, and then some have legal elements of it. The more you educate yourself, the more you understand, I think the more traction you'll have. I think we had a question over here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Kevin Fryer. This is my first encounter with the NF community, and I am impressed with you guys. This has been really inspiring, fulfilling. But I had two encounters, and I'm going to ask these two guys, Ken and Eddie, about them because they were with them, and it's my barrier that I need to overcome. So I saw Eddie at the coffee stand this morning, and I said hello to him. How are you enjoying the conference? And then the barista came out and had a reaction to Eddie. And it really like chilled the whole conversation. I walked away. I should have stood there and talked to him. Ken, the other day while I was speaking, giving my talk, the captioning was driving Ken nuts. I thought I was driving Ken nuts, and I wanted to talk to him about it since. So how do people like me enter the conversation with you, wanting to know you and not so much about NF, although maybe we'll learn about that later. What's the best way to approach you and talk to you? What do you want to start for, or what do you want for a conversation starter?
Well, I'm always pretty open about my deafness and my having NF2, and I always encourage people to ask me rather than assume that they know what I have or what I'm dealing with. Regarding the captioning, yeah, it was driving me crazy because what was happening was it was stopping, and then I was trying to get them to restart, and they were having some technical difficulties, etc. Tonight or today, it's been working really great. And you guys can't see this, but we've got a huge screen up here that shows the captions, but it's different than what you see because if I'm sitting at the table, I can't see the captions at the bottom. So I had to move them up to the top on my screen, but you guys, it doesn't affect yours. But that's another example of self-advocacy, and asking for what I need. So it's always important to do that.
Yeah, it's just connecting with others here in the NF community, I guess just asking general questions, how you're connected to NF, like how long have you been involved in the community, like how many times you've been to, seminar conference, just asking simple questions to get, to know the person and what their connection is with NF.
Great. I think we have time for one from the that was submitted. Barbara, if you want to read that out loud.
Okay. From the app, there were two, they're interrelated, but who is the best person to ask to get help filing for a disability? Is it good to get your doctors to write a letter to help with approval?
Can I take that from not a doctor view, but a disability practitioner's view that has been on both sides, carrier, consultant? I'd say the patient really has to educate the physician on what they're looking for. A lot of times, doctors will fill out forms, but it's about tying it to someone's job description and what they do for a living, and then connected to the disability plan. Those are three elements, unfortunately, that lead to either denials or pending claims unnecessarily, but it's really about explaining to the doctor what they're trying to accomplish, and then the doctor can help. Clay?
No, exactly that. Like just bringing me a form and asking me to fill it out is going to be rough. And then that's usually when you get a generic answer. So the more specific you can be what you need, the more helpful and the faster we can get the forms filled out.
Okay, I think we have time for one more.
Okay.
By the way, we thank all of you for all your questions, participation, but we do have time for one more.
Okay. What am I supposed to do when a job I apply for and receive will not accommodate me over a simple chair because I can't stand for a long time, or getting a simple day off because of multiple doctor's appointments because of my NF? I told them during the interview and they said no problem, but then they have not kept the promise.
Okay. Again, I'm going to say this is not legal advice, but I'm not an attorney. But being in this space for a long time, one of the things you'll have is they call it FMLA. It's a Family Medical Leave Act that was that Bill Clinton signed in 1993. So you always have job protection if you're filing for a condition where you need help. And that was done for specific situations where you're caring for a family member, you're caring for yourself, or your diagnosis puts you in a situation where you need help. So in essence, I would get familiar with your company leave policies, because that is a federal leave, but there are company leaves out there that cover this specific situation. So if it's not an accommodation and you need time off or time to manage your situation, that's probably the best path. So take a look at your company's leave programs, get educated on it, and then there is job protection for these situations.
All right. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.